There's a particular kind of quiet that settles over a woman the moment she stops loving you. It's not the silence of sadness. It's the silence of arithmetic. Gemma Whitfield had been doing the math for 7 months, and tonight, as her husband's Audi Q7 crunched up the gravel driveway at 2:37 in the morning, the numbers finally balanced. She was sitting in the dark kitchen of their colonial revival in Savannah, Georgia, not waiting for him. She had stopped waiting for Nolan Whitfield 6 months ago. She was waiting for a notification. Her phone, face down on the granite counter, buzzed once. A text from her attorney. It read, "Filed. Clock starts at 8 a.m. Good luck, Gemma." She deleted the message, locked the phone, and poured herself a glass of water. Tap water. She had stopped buying the imported sparkling he insisted on. Small rebellions, invisible ones, had been her language for months. The front door opened. The smell hit her before his voice did. Not perfume exactly, but that particular cocktail of hotel sheets, somebody else's shampoo, and the faint chemical sweetness of a freshly dry-cleaned alibi. Nolan had gotten lazy about it. In the beginning, he would shower at the gym on the way home. Now he just walked in wearing her like a second skin. "Gem, you up?" His voice was casual. Relaxed. The voice of a man who believed he was smarter than everyone around him. "Kitchen," she said. He appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie. He was handsome. She could admit that without feeling anything anymore. Tall, square jaw, the kind of thick dark hair that photographed well for the firm's website. Nolan was a partner at Hargrove and Whitfield, one of Savannah's oldest real estate development firms. He had built his identity around the word partner. He loved that word. He applied it generously to everything except his marriage. "Client dinner ran late," he said, opening the fridge. He pulled out a beer. "Harrison wants to move forward on the Riverside lots, but the zoning commission is dragging their feet. I swear, this city runs on molasses and nepotism." Gemma watched him perform. That's what it was. A performance. He wasn't telling her about his evening. He was constructing an evening that didn't exist. Brick by brick, like one of his developments. She knew exactly where he had been. Room 42012 at the Oglethorpe Grand. With Paige Mercer, the 26-year-old marketing coordinator his firm had hired 8 months ago. Gemma knew the room number because she had been paying for it. That was the part that still made her jaw clench, not the affair, the money. Her money. Gemma Whitfield was not the helpless Southern wife Nolan had convinced himself she was. Before she married him, she had been Gemma Fontaine, the only daughter of Richard Fontaine, who had built Fontaine Maritime Logistics from a single tugboat into a fleet that moved cargo across the entire Gulf Coast. When her father died 3 years ago, Gemma inherited the company, the portfolio, and a trust fund that made Nolan's developer salary look like pocket change. But she had been quiet about it. Her father had taught her that. "Money talks," Richard used to say, leaning back in his dock office with grease under his fingernails and a $40 million balance sheet in the drawer. But wealth whispers. Nolan had married her thinking she was comfortably well off. He didn't know the scale. He didn't know because he had never asked. He had been too busy talking about himself at the rehearsal dinner to notice that the marina they held it at belonged to her family. He had been too busy networking at her father's funeral to read the will. And now he was spending her trust distributions on hotel rooms for a girl who spelled definitely with an A. "How's Rosie?" Nolan asked, cracking the beer. Rosie. Their daughter. 14 months old, asleep upstairs in the nursery with the hand-painted magnolia mural that Gemma had spent 2 weekends creating while Nolan was at a conference in Charleston. "Fine." She said duck today. "Duck?" Nolan laughed. "That's my girl. Future negotiator. Everything's a duck or a deal." He kissed the top of Gemma's head as he passed. She let him. It meant nothing. It was muscle memory, like a handshake at the end of a meeting. He went upstairs. She heard the shower turn on. He was washing off Paige Mercer before climbing into bed beside her. Gemma sat in the dark kitchen and opened her phone one more time. She scrolled through a folder she had labeled recipes. It did not contain recipes. It contained 7 months of meticulous documentation, screenshots of Nolan's credit card statements showing charges at the Oglethorpe Grand, timestamped photos from the hotel's parking garage, taken by a private investigator named Claudette Ross, a retired Chatham County Sheriff's deputy who now specialized in matrimonial surveillance. Text messages between Nolan and Paige recovered from the cloud backup he didn't know Gemma had access to, because Nolan had set up the family iCloud account using Gemma's email and never bothered to create his own. There were also recordings, Georgia was a one-party consent state for audio. Gemma had consented. But the crown jewel of the folder wasn't about the affair. It was a forensic audit of Hargrove and Whitfield's books, conducted by her father's former CFO, a meticulous Korean-American woman named June Park who could find a missing penny in a landfill. June had uncovered something that made the affair look quaint. Nolan had been siphoning money from the firm's escrow accounts, not a lot, not enough to trigger an automatic audit, but enough over 3 years to amount to $380,000 in misappropriated client funds. He had used the money to cover personal debts, including a disastrous sports gambling habit he had hidden from everyone, and to fund the lifestyle he projected to Paige. The dinners. The jewelry. The weekend in Hilton Head where he told Paige he was basically separated. He wasn't basically separated. He was basically a felon. Gemma closed the folder. She rinsed her glass and set it in the drying rack. She walked upstairs, past the master bedroom where the shower was still running, and into the nursery. Rosie was asleep on her back, arms flung wide, mouth slightly open. She had Gemma's nose and her grandfather's stubbornness. Gemma leaned over the crib and pressed her lips to the baby's forehead, breathing in the clean, powdery scent of her. "Tomorrow," Gemma whispered. "Tomorrow, everything changes." She didn't sleep. She lay next to Nolan, who snored with the deep, unbothered rhythm of a man who had never once considered that his wife might be smarter than him. She stared at the ceiling and ran through the timeline one more time. At 7:45 a.m., Nolan left for the office. He was wearing the blue suit Gemma had picked out for him 2 years ago, back when she still cared what he looked like. He kissed Rosie, who was in her high chair eating banana slices. He kissed Gemma on the cheek. "Big day," he said. "Harrison meeting at 9. Wish me luck." "Good luck," Gemma said. She meant it. He was going to need it. At 8:01 a.m., the petition for divorce was officially filed with the Chatham County Superior Court. The filing included a request for emergency temporary custody of Rosie, supported by an affidavit from Claudette Ross, documenting Nolan's pattern of overnight absences and a psychological evaluation suggesting instability. Gemma's attorney, a woman named Fiona Blackwell, who had the bedside manner of a surgeon and the instincts of a pit viper, had prepared the filing with the precision of a military operation. At 8:15 a.m., a certified letter was delivered to the offices of Hargrove and Whitfield, addressed to Raymond Hargrove, Nolan's senior partner. The letter, sent anonymously from a P.O. box but containing very specific documentation, outlined the escrow discrepancies. It included account numbers, dates, and a trail so clean that even a first-year auditor could follow it. At 8:30 a.m., Gemma called a moving company, not a regular moving company. Fontaine Maritime had a logistics division that could relocate an entire warehouse overnight. 3 trucks, 8 men. A supervisor named Earl who had worked for Gemma's father for 20 years and asked no questions. "The nursery first," Gemma told Earl, standing in the foyer with Rosie on her hip. "Then the kitchen. Then my office. Everything marked with blue tape goes. Everything without tape stays." "And the garage?" Earl asked. "Leave his car. Leave his golf clubs. Leave the bourbon collection." She paused. "Actually, take the good bourbon, the Pappy Van Winkle. He won't appreciate it where he's going." Earl almost smiled. "Yes, ma'am." By 9 a.m., while Nolan was sitting in the Harrison meeting pitching a riverfront condo development he would never build, his house was being methodically disassembled. Gemma had spent weeks placing small blue tape marks on everything that was hers, everything that was Rosie's, and everything that Nolan had bought with stolen money. The Eames chair from the living room, the KitchenAid mixer he had never touched, the entire nursery, down to the outlet covers, her grandmother's silver. The family portraits, except the wedding photo, which she left hanging alone on an otherwise bare wall. She did not take his clothes. She did not take his laptop. She did not vandalize. This wasn't destruction. It was surgery. At 10:30 a.m., Nolan's phone buzzed during the Harrison meeting. It was a text from Raymond Hargrove's assistant. "Mr. Hargrove requests your presence in his office immediately. Meeting is canceled." Nolan frowned. He excused himself from the conference room, straightening his tie. Harrison looked annoyed. The other associates exchanged glances. Nolan walked into Raymond Hargrove's corner office expecting a discussion about the zoning delays. Raymond was 71 years old, a Savannah institution, a man who had survived 3 recessions and 2 wives. He sat behind his mahogany desk with his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and a stack of papers in front of him. "Close the door, Nolan." Nolan closed the door. He sat down in the leather chair across from Raymond, the chair where associates received praise or termination, never anything in between. "What's going on, Ray?" "Harrison's waiting." "Harrison can wait." Raymond picked up the top sheet of paper. "Do you want to explain why $380,000 in escrow funds from the Palmetto Ridge project have been moved to a personal account at Coastal Federal?" The blood left Nolan's face. It happened so fast he actually felt dizzy, like the chair was tilting backward. That's a bookkeeping error. I can explain." "Can you also explain the Tidewater account and the Magnolia Bluff account?" Raymond's voice was steady, but his hands were trembling, not with fear, with anger. "Because I've got a letter here, Nolan, with enough documentation to put you in a federal courtroom, and I have a fiduciary duty to my clients. Do you understand what that means? Ray, please, just let me." "The Georgia Bar has been notified. Our outside counsel has been retained to conduct an independent audit, and your access to the firm's accounts has been revoked as of—" Raymond checked his watch 9 minutes ago. "You can't do this. I'm a named partner." "You were a named partner." Raymond removed his glasses and set them on the desk. He looked old in that moment and tired. "Get your things, Nolan. Security will escort you, and I'd advise you to get a criminal attorney, a good one. You're going to need it." Nolan stood up. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else. He walked out of Raymond's office and into the hallway, where 2 uniformed security guards were waiting with a cardboard box. The walk through the open-plan office was the longest of his life. Every head turned. Every keyboard stopped clicking. The interns stared. Paige Mercer, sitting at her desk near the window, looked up from her computer. Their eyes met. Hers went wide. She looked at the security guards, at the box, at Nolan's ashen face, and she looked away. She looked back at her screen as if she had never seen him before in her life. Nolan was deposited on the sidewalk in front of the building he had helped design. The box contained a framed diploma, a coffee mug that said "World's Best Dad," and a stress ball shaped like a house. He put the box on the passenger seat of his car and drove home. The drive took 12 minutes. It should have been the longest 12 minutes of his life. But the real horror didn't start until he turned onto Abercorn Street and saw the moving truck pulling away from his driveway. He almost rear-ended the mailbox. He threw the car into park and ran up the front steps. The door was unlocked. He pushed it open. The foyer was empty. The console table where Gemma kept the mail and a vase of fresh flowers was gone. The coat hooks were bare. The hardwood floor had pale rectangular ghosts where the rugs had been. "Gemma?" His voice echoed. He walked into the living room. The sofa was gone. The bookshelves were gone. The television remained, sitting on the bare floor, unplugged, its black screen reflecting his distorted face back at him. He ran to the kitchen. The counters were wiped clean. The refrigerator was open, empty, the light off. On the kitchen island, where every morning Gemma set out Rosie's breakfast, there was a single item, a manila envelope. He tore it open. Inside was the divorce petition, the custody filing, and a handwritten note on Gemma's personal stationery, the cream-colored paper with the small anchor watermark that had been a gift from her father. The note read, "Nolan, you once told me that the most important thing in real estate is location. I agree. That's why Rosie and I have relocated. The petition explains the rest. Don't call me. My number has changed. If you want to communicate, contact Fiona Blackwell at Blackwell Family Law. And Nolan, before you drive to the Oglethorpe Grand looking for sympathy, you should know that Paige has been updating her resume all week. She already knew the ship was sinking, she just didn't tell you. Some partner." Nolan read the note 3 times. Each reading made it worse. He pulled out his phone and called Gemma. The number was disconnected. He called her mother. Doris Fontaine answered on the second ring. "Doris, where is Gemma? Where is my daughter?" There was a pause. Then Doris spoke with the particular southern sweetness that could curdle milk. "Nolan, sweetheart, I think you need to worry about yourself right now. Gemma and Rosie are just fine. Better than fine, actually. They're exactly where they should be." "Doris, I swear to God." "Bless your heart," Doris said, and hung up. Nolan threw his phone against the kitchen wall. It didn't break. It bounced off the drywall and landed face up, the cracked screen showing a wallpaper photo of Rosie laughing in the bath. He stared at it. Then he picked it up and called Paige. "Hey." Her voice was guarded, not the purring, flirtatious tone he was used to. Flat. "Careful. Paige, I need you. Everything's falling apart. Gemma left. She took the baby. Raymond fired me. I need to come over. I need to think. A long pause. He could hear her breathing. He could hear the sound of a zipper, like she was packing a bag. Nolan, I can't do this. Can't do what? I need a place to crash for one night. One night, Paige. I mean, I can't do this. Us, whatever this was. Her voice cracked slightly, but it wasn't sadness. It was self-preservation. I've seen the numbers, Nolan. Everyone in the office has seen the numbers, Nolan. Everyone in the office has seen the numbers. Raymond called an all-staff meeting after you left. They know about the escrow. They know about us. HR pulled me in 10 minutes ago. I'm probably getting fired too. This is not the time to. I'm 26 years old, Paige said, her voice hardening. I am not going down with you. I didn't steal anything. I didn't know where the money came from. And honestly, you told me you were getting divorced. You told me you were getting divorced. You made me the villain in a story where you were the only bad guy. Paige, don't call me again. Click. Nolan sat on the bare kitchen floor, his back against the island, the manila envelope in his lap. The house was so quiet, he could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. The clock Gemma had left. It was an antique ship's clock that had belonged to her father. She had left it on purpose, he realized, ticking, counting down. He didn't know what it was counting down to, but he would find out. 3 weeks later, Nolan Whitfield was living in a furnished studio apartment above a dry cleaner on Broughton Street. The studio cost $1,100 a month, paid from a personal savings account that held $6,200, the only money Gemma hadn't been able to touch because it predated the marriage. He had grown a patchy beard. He had lost 15 pounds, not from exercise but from the diet of gas station coffee and microwave burritos that had become his sustenance. His blue suit hung in the closet unworn. He lived in sweatpants. He had hired an attorney, a man named Gil Oberlin, who charged $350 an hour and delivered bad news with the enthusiasm of a mortician. The custody petition is airtight, Gil told him over the phone. She's got the documentation, the investigator's report, the financial records, and frankly, the escrow situation makes you toxic in front of any family court judge in this county. She stole my daughter. She relocated with her daughter pending a custody determination. It's legal. She's the primary caregiver. You were gone 5 nights a week. Where is she, Gil? Can you find out? She's not required to disclose her address until the court orders it. And given that she's filed a motion arguing you pose a risk of financial instability and erratic behavior, the judge is unlikely to force disclosure anytime soon. Erratic behavior? I'm not erratic. You threw your phone at a wall, drove to your former office at 11 p.m., and tried to get past security and left 14 voicemails on your mother-in-law's phone in one night. 3 of those voicemails included profanity. Nolan closed his eyes. He had done all of those things. In the moment, each one had felt justified. In the light of a legal filing, they looked insane. What do I do, Gil? You get a criminal attorney for the embezzlement charges, which are coming. You stay away from Gemma, Rosie, and anyone named Fontaine. And you start rebuilding your life from scratch. From scratch. Nolan had built things his entire career. But he had always started with someone else's land, someone else's capital, someone else's trust. He had never built anything from his own foundation. He wasn't sure he had one. Meanwhile, 1,200 miles away, in a small coastal town in Maine that Nolan had never heard of and would never think to look, Gemma Whitfield was painting a kitchen. The house was a gray-shingled Cape Cod on a bluff overlooking Penobscot Bay. It had 3 bedrooms, a wood stove, and a porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Gemma had bought it through a trust under her maiden name 4 months before the divorce filing. She had paid cash. The seller was a retired lobsterman who was moving to Florida. He asked no questions. She offered no explanations. Rosie was in her playpen in the living room, stacking foam blocks and babbling at the cat. The cat was a gray tabby named Biscuit, who had appeared on the porch the second night and refused to leave. Gemma respected that kind of stubbornness. The kitchen was coming along. She had chosen a warm sage green for the walls, a color that reminded her of her father's office at the dock. She painted slowly, methodically, the way she did everything now. There was no rush. For the first time in 4 years, nobody was lying to her. Her phone sat on the counter. A new phone, new number, new everything. The only people who had this number were Fiona Blackwell, June Park, her mother Doris, and her cousin Harper, who lived in Portland and had helped her find the house. Harper was Gemma's opposite in almost every way. Loud, tattooed, a marine biologist who wore rubber boots year-round and could drink longshoremen under the table. But Harper was also ferociously loyal and had a shotgun in her truck that she called Conversation Ender. "You don't need a gun, Harper," Gemma had told her. "I know," Harper said. "But the gun doesn't know that." Gemma smiled at the memory. She dipped her roller in the paint tray and continued. The rhythm was soothing. Up, down, building something. Not for anyone else. For herself and for Rosie. She thought about Nolan sometimes. Not with love. Not even with anger anymore. With a kind of clinical detachment, like reading about a natural disaster that happened in another country. She felt sorry for the woman she had been. The one who had believed his excuses, who had told herself that every marriage had rough patches, who had swallowed her suspicions like bitter medicine because the alternative was too frightening. The alternative turned out to be Maine. The alternative turned out to be paint on her hands and salt air through the windows and a daughter who said duck and mama and beakit at the cat. The alternative was better than anything Nolan had ever built. Back in Savannah, the walls were closing in. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation opened a case based on Raymond Hargrove's referral. Nolan was served with a grand jury subpoena on a Tuesday morning while he was doing laundry at the coin-op. The process server found him folding his underwear. That detail, somehow, was the one that broke him, not the subpoena itself. The fact that he, Nolan Whitfield, named partner, Savannah Magazine 40 Under 40, was folding his own underwear in a public laundromat when a stranger handed him a legal document he called Gil. Gil referred him to a criminal defense attorney named Bernard Fox, a tall, grave man who wore suspenders and spoke in paragraphs. "The evidence is substantial," Bernard told him in their first meeting. "The escrow trail is documented. Your firm has cooperated fully, and the source of the initial complaint appears to be someone with intimate knowledge of your financial practices." "My wife," Nolan said. "Your estranged wife," Bernard corrected, "who, I should note, is represented by Fiona Blackwell, a woman I have lost to twice in my career. Both times it cost my client everything. Can we fight this? We can negotiate. The DA may offer a plea. Restitution plus probation if you're lucky. Prison time if you're not." "Prison? You took $380,000, Nolan. From clients, from escrow. In Georgia, that's a felony. Multiple counts." Nolan stared at his hands, the hands that had sketched blueprints, poured champagne, unbuttoned, Paige Mercer's blouse in a hotel room, paid for with stolen money. Those hands were shaking now. "I need to see my daughter," he whispered. "Then you need to demonstrate to the court that you are stable, employed, and not facing active criminal charges. Right now, you're 0 for 3. The plea deal came 2 months later. Nolan pleaded guilty to 2 counts of wire fraud. The judge, a woman named Clara Hutchins who had been on the bench for 30 years and had seen every variety of entitled man the state could produce, sentenced him to 18 months in a minimum security facility outside Macon, plus full restitution. Before the sentencing, Nolan was allowed to make a statement. He stood in the courtroom in a borrowed suit that didn't fit. He had prepared a speech about redemption, about being a changed man, about wanting to be a father. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He stood there for 11 seconds of absolute silence. Then he said, "I did it, all of it. I'm sorry." He sat down. Gil looked at him. Bernard looked at him. Neither of them said anything. It was the most honest thing Nolan had ever said. In Maine, Gemma watched the sentencing via court livestream on her laptop. Rosie was napping. The house was quiet except for the wood stove crackling and the distant sound of the ocean. She watched her husband, the man she had married on a pier at sunset, the man who had promised her everything and delivered nothing, stand up in a courtroom and finally tell the truth. She closed the laptop. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel vindicated. She felt a deep, exhausting sadness that sat in her chest like a stone, not for him, for the years she had wasted believing in a version of him that never existed. She walked to the nursery. Rosie was awake now, standing in her crib, holding the rail, bouncing on her legs. When she saw Gemma, she grinned with 4 tiny teeth. "Mama." "Hey, sweet girl." Gemma picked her up. She carried her to the porch. The bay was silver in the afternoon light. A lobster boat was chugging toward the harbor. Biscuit was asleep on the railing. Gemma sat in the rocking chair her cousin Harper had found at a yard sale. She held Rosie in her lap and rocked. She thought about her father, who had built an empire from salt water and stubbornness. She thought about her mother, who had answered Nolan's desperate phone call with "bless your heart" and meant every sharp syllable of it. She thought about Fiona Blackwell and June Park and Claudette Ross, the women who had helped her dismantle her old life with the precision of a demolition crew. And she thought about the house. Not the colonial revival in Savannah with its columns and its pretensions. This house. The gray shingles, the creaky porch, the sage green kitchen that she had painted with her own hands. This was the house that mattered. Not because it was impressive, because it was hers. Nolan Whitfield served 14 months. When he got out, he moved to Jacksonville, where nobody knew his name. He got a job at a hardware store. He filed for visitation rights. The court granted him supervised visits, once a month, at a neutral location. The first time he saw Rosie, she was 2.5 years old and didn't recognize him. She hid behind Gemma's leg and peeked out with suspicious eyes. "Hi, Rosie," he said. His voice broke. "I'm your dad." Rosie looked up at Gemma. Gemma nodded. "It's okay, baby." Rosie didn't go to him that first visit, or the second. On the third visit, she let him read her a picture book about a duck. She sat on the opposite end of the couch, keeping a careful distance, but she listened. When he finished, she said, "Again." He read it again. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was the smallest possible beginning, offered by a child who didn't know the history and didn't care. Gemma watched from across the room, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. She had built a life without him. She had built it on the foundation he had never bothered to inspect, the one made of her own strength, her own money, and her own unshakable refusal to be a footnote in someone else's story. They say the most dangerous person in the world is a quiet woman with a plan. But that's not quite right. The most dangerous person is a woman who finally realizes she doesn't need you, not your name, not your money, not your approval. And when she walks out the door, she doesn't slam it. She closes it softly, locks it behind her, and throws the key into the sea. And the house she builds next will have no room for you in it. What do you think? Did Gemma go too far? Or did Nolan get exactly what he earned? Drop your answer in the comments. If this story hit you in the chest, smash that like button. It tells the algorithm to show this to more people who need to hear it. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story. We've got one coming next week about a surgeon's wife who discovered her husband's secret second family, and what she did with that information will leave you speechless. Thanks for watching, and remember, never underestimate the woman who stops arguing and starts planning.